Om Shanti and good morning. A happy new year and special welcome to Charlie all the way there in Australia, probably in Sydney. Don't know where. I hope you had a good start into the new year, Charlie.
I did. Thank you, Carolyn. Yes, I had a wonderful start. It's very hot here. Very hot.
I'm in Melbourne and it's cold, not so cold as it should be due to climate change. It's actually quite relatively warm, but not as warm as on your end, for sure. We had a beautiful 2 days of the retreat already last year, a few days ago. And it's been wonderful to hear from Mike and from Judy Rogers about their experiences with churning and writing, and the approaches they shared were so different, and we are very much looking forward to hear from you today. But even though everyone for sure knows you, I will shortly introduce you properly. So yeah, our dear Charlie is the national coordinator of the Brahma Kumaris in Australia, and also very active in the international Yakya with many projects and responsibilities. And Charlie is really someone who is, I would say, in the middle of the heart of the double foreign family, as well as the Yakya, Indian Yakya. But we really appreciate a lot how you also translate Baba's Gyan into a Western context in a very natural and beautiful way. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. We will hear from you your experiences. After that, we have some time for question and answers through the chat, and then we will also have a meditation together. Thank you, and over to you.
So thank you so much, Carolyn. So lovely to see you, and thank you to Stefania also. It's really lovely to be able to be with you and share some of my thoughts. But first of all, I'd just like to say Happy New Year to everybody. A little bit belated perhaps, but and greetings from all the divine family in this part of the world. Sometimes when I like to sit in front of Baba, I like to approach my relationship with Baba in different ways. And one way I really love is to just hold the feeling that Baba eternally retains truth. Baba eternally is full of truth. He's never, ever corrupted. He's never been influenced. Truth remains in its original form within him. And then I think of my journey of how I became corrupted. I lost all truth through forgetting myself and forgetting Baba. And the incredible privilege, I would say, to sit in front of God at this time, the one who eternally retains truth. How long have we searched to find this unadulterated and pure truth? How do I really absorb that truth into myself in the way that Baba holds it? And in a way, Baba so many times says, children, churn the ocean of knowledge. And sometimes when I listen to the Moli, I think that this is God speaking this unadulterated truth. He's sharing how he thinks. He's sharing his perception of reality. What is real reality, if I can say? Do I listen to it on my own semi-body conscious level, or do I really absorb it in the same way? Do I have a similar perception as Baba? And right from the beginning, ever since I started my Brahman journey, I've really been yearning to see life through the same lens as Baba, interpret life. To me, that is one way of sort of churning, is interpreting reality in the same way that God interprets reality. But when I started, I was in London, and you know, as we all know, Daddy Janki was there, and I think you all know her story of she came late, and she used to read the Morley. You know, I thought it was 6 or 8 times. Genti Ben told me recently it was 10 times a day. So I decided to do that. And I actually had a job in the heart of London. And in those days, there was no written Morleys. And so I used to write the Morley word for word, because in those days, I used to post it to Australia. And the Morley, because there was a few BKs in Australia, including Ken, the Morley they had in the morning was reading my handwriting, which is pretty shocking. So they had to do that. But I would read it. I mean, I would write it, and then I'd read it on the way to work. I'd read it at morning tea. I'd read it at lunchtime. I'd read it on the way home. I'd read it in the evening. And it was an incredible experience, actually, because when I first read it, I enjoyed it. When I read it the second time, I started to see how the points connect, you know, how Baba jumps from one thing to the next. By the third reading, I started to feel the deeper themes that were really moving through the Morley. By the fourth reading, I felt I was becoming more soul conscious. And by the fifth reading, it almost felt like I was experiencing the Morley more than just listening in a heady way. And it really began my journey with churning, that in one sense, churning is really transforming what I know into what I feel. Churning is really like experiencing. And then I went to India and I met with Dada Ananka Shaw. And I think many of you would remember Dada A.K. as we knew him. He was related to Brahma Baba by marriage. And he actually worked in Baba's jewelry shop in Calcutta. I went there and I saw it with him. He showed me where he stood, where Brahma Baba stood, etc. And he said a really interesting thing once, which I practiced. And he said, collect all the different subjects in a little book. So everything, and write down everything that Baba says. So I had lots of little books, one on the soul, one on the supreme soul, one on the golden age, one on why God is omnipresent, numerous things. And I began to collect all those points. I was absolutely staggered, actually, how much Baba says about the golden age. If you had asked me before then, I would say, yes, Baba does say, but not that much. But I collected hundreds and hundreds of things that Baba said about the golden age. So that also sort of opened my head to the vastness of the knowledge and churning. And even I remember Daddy Janki in those early days would say that take about 5 points during the day and give each point a few hours to really explore deeply. And how the more you churn, you deal with your account of waste. There's either churning or waste. And I tried all these things, but I think there was a huge shift for me in 1985, because I went to Madhaban and Baba met the double foreigners in Om Shanti Bhavan. Some of you will remember this. And Baba said to the foreigners, I'd been 10 years in Gyan, do the course again. And he called it the realization course. And Baba said something that has remained with me till this day. He said, you know the knowledge, you believe the knowledge, you teach the knowledge, but you don't experience the knowledge. And that really was like an incredible realization for me. And then Baba said, every point of knowledge has an associated experience. So we listen to the point of truth, but it has an associated feeling with it. And in a way, from then on, I began to replace the word churning with experience. When Baba says children churn the knowledge, I believe for me, it's experience the knowledge. Go take one of God's truths so deeply and sort of play with it so deeply that you extract the juice of experience, you feel it. Because really, that's what sustains me. In my experience, it's spiritual experience that has really sustained me as I've gone further. And this really, really touched me. And I think this is where my whole Brahmin life took a different turn. And I really challenged myself at each point. Okay, I know this and I believe it, but how do I experience it? How do I really extract the experience from God's truth? Because that's really the power that transforms me. And I think it's really the difference between Gyan and Bhakti. You know, I think Bhakti is about knowing and believing. It's like two-dimensional. So two-dimensional means it's flat. It has no depth. Gyan is knowing and believing and experiencing. And in a way, this is what creates real depth. Because sometimes I think some of Baba's children feel that churning is a sort of an intellectual exercise. And we are brought up in a very heady intellectual culture. And often when we go deep into analyzing things like in an academic way, we feel, oh, this is really deep churning. And personally, I don't feel so. I feel that really deep churning is when I extract the feeling, the taste, the experience out of truth. And sometimes I used to feel that the 3 steps of churning for me were first knowing, second realizing, and third experiencing. So I know I'm a soul. And as I really sit down and I really go so deep into the realization, the reality is I'm a non-physical point that always exists. And I really engage with that realization. The experience is the feeling of peace. So I've taken God's truth and I've extracted a true feeling of peace. I've churned out of the truth and I've transformed it into that. I've churned it to a point I'm feeling peace. Or my home, the reality of the home is a dimension beyond this world. And when I really sit down and I absolutely realize that my eternal home is beyond this material world, and I identify with that home. As I realize this, the feeling is of a state of being in this world, but completely and utterly detached from this world. Such a sweet feeling, such a sweet feeling. And so in a sense, for me, it's like, first is to know, the first step is to know. The second step is to realize. The next 998 steps are educating myself how to experience. And to me, I really feel, in a way, converting the knowledge into experience is really true remembrance or yoga. Because I'm living in the experience of God's truth. I'm not just knowing and believing God's truth. I've churned it so deeply. I'm actually living in a similar perception as Baba has of things. And as I was on this journey personally, I began to realize that my education, or the way I grew up, I could understand certain types of thinking. You know, logical thinking and rational thinking. It's the beauty of science. And it's a wonderful type of thinking that we can get an idea and logically make deductions to come to a conclusion. Very rational, logical thinking. It's very essential. Or creative thinking. The arts have given us creative. We take an idea, we let it grow and embellish and flourish. You know, when I was in San Francisco once, they were telling me all these big tech companies like Google and Microsoft, they just employ people to think, come up with outrageous ideas, you know, really out of the box stuff. So we are good at that too. But experiential thinking, when I sit down and I use my thoughts, I churn God's truth to create a feeling and an experience, because it's the feeling and the experience which really sustains me in this spiritual journey. As you know, that's really my experience. And the fruit of churning is really this experience. And I remember in my early days, I went to stay with Jagdish Pai in Shakti Nagar. And, you know, Jagdish Pai was an extraordinary soul. He was the senior brother of the Yagi. He was the spokesperson, had an amazing intellect. He wrote about 100 books, as far as I'm aware, in 5 languages. And, you know, I said to him, I had some questions. I'd love to talk to you. And anyway, at one point I said to him, for a person like me, where I'm at in my journey, I was maybe about 12 or 15 years with Baba. What do you think is the most important thing for someone like me? Instantly, he said, new experiences in yoga. And I feel often we do intellectually play with the knowledge. We do, you know, really play around with it in creative ways, intelligent ways, rational ways. But to really educate myself to extract the experience from truth, that takes a little bit of time and energy. And even only about maybe 7, 8 years ago, when we used to have the walk past in front of Baba, do you remember how we used to go on the stage and walk by and get our 3 seconds of drishti? I'm sure most of us remember. And we were walking by a few of the older brothers from the Western countries, foreign countries, and Baba stopped us and said, I want to speak to you. And so we leaned over, and Baba, he said some very sweet things, but about 4 or 5 times, he said, create new experiences in yoga. And really, I thought a lot how often, you know, we create new ideas when we churn and so on intellectually, but the art of really filling a new fragrance in the sacred space of my mind, a whole new feeling, a whole new taste. That when you think about your Brahman life and when you really feel motivated and enthusiastic, it's often when you have a new experience that really motivates and moves. And in a way, I think I often feel that's what Baba really means by churn. Go so deep that you create these new experiences. And so I began to think of my mind like a laboratory. I've always liked this idea because often I think our religious sanskaras, once I hear the knowledge and I believe it, that's it, I know it. To me, as I said, that's the second step out of thousands of steps of unpacking the truth. So I feel it. And I think that I love the idea that scientists constantly experiment. They have the aim to come to some sort of discovery, and they will try again and again and again. And so I've really tried to see my mind as a laboratory where I put in the ingredients of different knowledge, and as I churn and play with them, try to extract new feelings. And I remember once that Baba said something that I really loved. He sort of talked about the formula for what you could call as churning or experience. I feel a formula that really helped me once again. And as always, Baba is so incredibly simple. And Baba said, Baba said, become a point, the formula, become a point, apply a point, and remember a point. And I really tried to use that formula in a sense to churn so that I can experience. And that first step, become a point. To me, this is lifelong learning. You know, one thing I've had in my mind recently is that someone told me, I don't know, a year or so ago, that science now believes that this body is made up of 40 trillion cells. That's just mind-boggling. But the soul, I am more subtle than one of those. When you really get your head around the reality of the self, how deeply have I become the point? Because it's only when I really become the point that I'm starting to move into God's perception of his knowledge. And I sort of feel that become a point, apply a point, remember a point, prepares my mind to think like Baba in a sense, to taste the knowledge like Baba is tasting it. So I've done numerous experiments in the laboratory of my mind about letting go, stepping back, withdrawing, you know, from this material form and all its labels to really become a point. And then that second step, apply a point. Baba in a way means a full stop, because I've realized that, you know, the reality of the human mind at the moment, we are so self-absorbed. We are so absorbed in me and my story and my life and how I feel and my relationships. It's like I'm completely dominated by my karmic story. And in a way, Baba doesn't get much of a look in. I feel that I'm just that self-absorption. And what I've been experimenting with is to be really detached from myself, step outside my story and how I feel and what's going on in my life and all that detail, and sit in front of Baba. And I remember once Baba met one of the Australian brothers, and he said to him, sit at Amrit Vela with a plain intellect and Baba will touch it. You will have special experiences. To me, that means to sit in front of Baba without this self-absorption, without this agenda of my, you know, driving my thinking, my karmic story, my issues, constantly driving my thinking. It's almost like I become the seed, the soul. I become the point. I put a full stop to the old self. And it's almost like I'm preparing myself to sit in front of Baba and take, rather than be so self-absorbed that I can't really take. It's almost like I'm preparing myself to be influenced by Baba. And then remember a point. And over the last 2 years, one of my main experiments has been around the subtle thread of the intellect, which the soul sits here and it's traveling instantly in numerous places, infinite distances. Whatever I touch, even as you're listening now, wherever I travel, I touch, I'm influenced by that. And I download that influence and I create a feeling inside. So if I'm remembering an old story, a negative story, I'm influenced by that. If I remember someone's behavior, I'm influenced by that. And really how, when I remember, I become the point, I put a full stop to this incessant overthinking. I sit in front of Baba and I literally remember Baba, the subtle thread. I'm influenced by Baba and I live stream Baba and that feeling of belonging and closeness. In a sense, once I do that and I start to visit the knowledge, I'm in this utterly detached state, present in front of Baba. Each thought of knowledge is like magic. It comes alive. It's really so powerful. And it's almost like I'm trying to think or churn in a similar way to Baba at that time. I've prepared myself to convert the truth into my own experience by becoming that point, applying that point, and experience, remembering the point too. And over the years, with this sort of formula, I often ask myself the question when I'm doing these churning experiments, if I can call them that, how does it feel? So it's not just a head trip, an intellectual analysis of something. How does it feel? And I've done experiments on the form of the soul. I absolutely love it. I remember a Sakamuli when I first came in Gyan, and Baba said, children, wake up early in the morning and think that I'm a tiny point and become smaller and smaller and smaller. Children, there is nothing smaller than the human soul. And the whole Muli Baba was coaching. It was like he was coaching us to let go, withdraw from this temporary material form to the most subtle self. And, I find that the more I feel that, then I feel really quite uninfluenced by things happening around me. But probably my main churning experiment, which I've done on and off for years and years, is to feel being incorporeal. And I once asked Didi Manmohini, who was an incredible yogi, and I said, Didi ji, of all the efforts that we have to make, what's the most important? Because Baba tells us to do so many things. Instantly, she said to be incorporeal. And then I was reflecting, when Sakar Baba left his body and summarized 32 years of churning, if you can say, and experiencing, what was the first word? Incorporeal, egoless, and viceless. And I do it during the day as I move around. I keep one experiment, one churning experiment. And the whole thing is to unpack it so I feel being incorporeal. And the incredible feeling that when I feel I'm a non-physical entity in this material dimension, you're in the dimension, you're in this material world, but totally uninfluenced by this material world. It's such a sweet place. You're connected, you're responsible, but you're completely free in a sense and detached. And so it's like when we churn to the point of experience, we create these feelings. And even the feeling of eternity. Once Daddy Janki said, eternity is the essence of soul consciousness. And that really struck me. And I remember I went around for months, once again, really exploring, churning, unpacking the feeling. And you know what I found? The more I started to taste the feeling that I always exist and feel I was moving beyond the body conscious mindset that's been impregnated for half a cycle that I'm temporary, the account of fear starts to go. It's not that I have to try to deal with my fears so much. The more I step into the churning, the experiencing, the tasting, the feeling of always existing, the account of fear starts to go down. And I've done so many experiments around being incorporeal, being eternal, being immortal, you know, the identity of the soul. That's deep. Because what I found, even though I was realizing that I know I'm a pure soul originally, but I was still identifying with my old story. And when you really move around in life, identifying with your original story rather than your conditioned story of now, that really starts to really bring the feeling of the natural feeling of purity back into the soul once again. I've done a lot of experiments around the vision of the soul too, how to see, how to be the soul and see how another soul sits in a body. And I really love doing these experiments. So churning for me, in a way, is taking one experiment, sometimes over days, sometimes weeks, and I've done a few for months and months, to keep unpacking it and asking how it feels. And the more I feel, I find that is an incredible sustenance for me. In saying that, I do sometimes write. And especially if I have to give a talk or something on a subject haven't really got clarity in my head. And what I love to do is sometimes sit in the early morning hours and churn, just churn that subject and then just write spontaneously. I don't think too much. I just write. In no particular order. I just let it flow on an automatic writing in a way. And then later I may sit down with it and start to order it a little bit in my head. So there's some sort of sequence to my thinking. And that really helps me understand a subject. So, I do love to write, and I have many notes that I've done over a long period of time on different subjects. And sometimes I refer to those things too. So writing is not a huge part for me. It's mainly really, I would say, as I was saying, experiencing, which I feel when Baba says children churn the ocean of knowledge, for me, I feel really Baba is saying children experience the ocean of knowledge. And so I am watching the time, and so I should probably put a full stop to my churning.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can just take a few moments of silence before we continue, and you can just give us Dristi, just a few moments of experience. Om Shanti, thank you. Wow, this was an absolute masterclass. So many treasures that were emerging. I loved the part when you started to talk about truth and how Baba is the one who holds truth eternally. And I think for us Brahmins, it's such a longing in the soul to be true and to live truth. So that was so beautiful. And just listening to you, how you used to write the mulli by hand and send it and read it many times through the day. I think now we have everything so ready-made and we have it on the computer, and it's so easy, but it's also easy to become a bit careless, I think. And I think it just shows, because we can feel from you the journey that you have done. It's felt. And listening to you now, it becomes obvious, yes, you have done your homework, and that's why it doesn't happen like automatically. It's not just natural that someone is born with, but it's this experimentation that you've been doing. So really beautiful. And I loved when you said that knowing is like one step, realizing is like another step, and then experiencing is like 998 steps. And yeah, and how it's not so much about intellectualizing, because we are brought up in our society and it's becoming more and more like that, I think, that everything has to be intellectual, and the more bright and clever you are, the better. So it really requires deep understanding of what churning is. So yeah, it was really wonderful. Thank you so much. And also you gave different yuktis, like collecting different subjects, exploring different subjects. You could even have different books, or yeah, and like collecting them. And yeah, it was really wonderful. So we have lots of questions coming in through the chat. So the first question is, what is Charlie By experimenting with today?
You know, I could say two things. I sort of have my long-term love to experiment is really the feeling of being incorporeal in this corporeal world. I think it's probably one of the sweetest feelings, because to me, when I feel incorporeal and I feel naturally detached from everything. I don't have to sort of, you know, when you think I should be detached, but if things are influencing me, I must be. I'm sort of forcing detachment. It's a natural consequence when I'm really in the incorporeal state. And sometimes, you know, I just really love to feel like there's a sense I'm just a non-physical entity that sits in this form. I feel quite separate, but in a sweet way, quite distinct from this material world. And that's like my long-term one. But the short-term one, I was touching on a little bit. I've just to really sit in front of Baba with that plain intellect, with an intellect that's not driven by something happening in my life and my world. And you know, this chronic processing and analyzing. There's a time for that, but I think it actually suppresses experience. The more I overthink, overanalyze, overprocess, it's a head trip. I get into a head trip rather than a real experience. And I feel the more I can be detached from myself and sit in front of Baba, be present in front of Baba, and just allow Baba to influence me, Shiv Baba to influence me. I think sometimes really unique feelings and quite different from what I've tasted before. So I love to try to sit as a child, detached from myself, not self-absorbed, with a plain intellect in front of Baba, allow Baba to touch me and influence me.
Beautiful. It's a very good input also for January, what you're saying now for the January effort. Another one is asking, could you explore a bit on the vision of the soul experiment? You talked about that you had experimented with the vision of the soul.
The vision of the soul, yeah. You know, I don't know whether you remember in the Sakamoli, sometimes Baba says, children, this is the highest effort. To see a soul in the body of the other. And when I began, you know, I was living in London. I can remember walking down the street, you know, as I worked in the heart of London thinking, you're a soul, you know, like so childlike in a way. And you just imagine a soul in the forehead. Secondly, the more I experienced that I was a bodiless soul, I began to see more how a bodiless soul sits in the body. But thirdly, the more I tasted the feeling of being incorporeal, it's more through the yoga of the intellect. You can see how the incorporeal works through the corporeal. And even more than that, the fourth step for me was understanding that in this incorporeal point in front of me, there's an eternal part that is never, ever going to change. And in that sense, just not allowing any influence of that soul, but having really goodwill for that soul. Really just seeing how an incorporeal soul acts through the corporeal, and even how it has an indelible, eternal, unchanging part. And sometimes I think, if I don't accept it now, when am I going to accept it? You know, it's unchanging. And I used to think that waste thought, when I come in front of a soul and I have waste thought, in a sense, waste thought is a lack of acceptance of drama and everyone's part in drama. I'm fighting, but the drama is perfect. The drama can never change. And I just love to see that. And I think when you really see the incorporeal and see the eternal part, there's really benevolent feelings emerge naturally, really deeply benevolent feelings for that other soul that's in front.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear how your journey has developed over the years, taking it to different levels. Here is another question. Can Brother Charlie give us a few thoughts he practices on one given point? For example, having unlimited disinterest for this dirty world. We all know it is a dirty world, but how to create the complete disinterest through churning?
Yeah, I think that's a really lovely question, because I think it's not about developing disinterest. It's about developing interest in Baba and Baba's truth. And automatically, when I'm churning, I'm so engaged with my relationship with Baba, my loving feelings with Baba, the belonging with Baba, Baba's truth. Or I think the natural consequence, I'm not pulled to this world. And I have a disinterest in it, and it has no dislike, because I don't think that's healthy if my disinterest is based on rejection or dislike. But it's just, I'm so absorbed, I'm so interested, I'm so in love on one level. There's just no pull or influence of the world. But I really love to, when Baba says something in the morning, like Baba said that time, children, every point has an associated experience. Every point, whether it's the point of the soul, the supreme soul, the home, so many points, extracting really and playing with them over a period of time, exploring and asking. I keep asking that question, because otherwise it can get very intellectual. How does it feel? How do I turn God's truth into my experience? That's the key. And that, to be honest, that takes time sometimes. It takes a lot of time. I realized I'd lost the art of spiritual experience, taking truth and converting it into a feeling.
Wonderful. There is a message here from someone to remind you to slow a little bit down, because there are many translations coming in. So we can take it a bit slower. And there's another question. When Baba speaks of our eternal world of silence, how to deal with the fact that we spent 5,000 years on Earth?
Yeah, it's a paradox, isn't it, that the souls that take one birth have virtually eternal silence, but we're the deity souls who, do the work in the confluence age, and I think build such an inner silence that it really at least stays with me for while I live in this material world. And I have relationships, I'm in families, I'm in a society in the golden age, but my mind is silent. And one image I've had, Stefania, is that, I think the more we lose truth, we overthink. And I feel the mind in the golden age is going to be so different. And I think the mind, now we think so much and experience hardly anything, because our thinking suppresses experience. In the golden age, my image is, when they have a slow motion film of a drop coming into a pond, it just goes slow, slow. And when it hits the pond, then the waves just slowly go out. I think the drop is like the thought, and the thought merges into a feeling. Each thought will create this fragrance of love, or this fragrance of belonging, or fragrance of joy. Each thought. And in a way, that's what we're learning now, that my thoughts, I just don't overthink on everything, but I'm converting my thoughts into the feeling, because it's the feelings that sustain me. We all know that when I sit in a yoga bhatti and I just feel so full of a quality of Baba, or feeling close to Baba, or loved by Baba, that feeling can sustain me for hours, days, weeks. It's the feeling that's the great power.
There's one interesting question here. Thanks, Charlie Bai. When it comes to feelings, they can also be very deceptive. How do you make sure that it's true?
I would like to, can I ask a question? Why are feelings deceptive? I'm asking you, and I know it's not your question.
So maybe, maybe Nesse, you were asking the question. Maybe would you like to, I think you can just unmute yourself, or you can write in the chat, just to explain a little
Maybe
more.
the tech team can give her the possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Charlie Bai. And feelings in life can also be very slippery, very temporary. And in that sense, they can be very deceptive, like just a glimpse of a feeling. And so how to make sure that you are on the right track, and, just continue with that, and then make sure that it is the right feeling. For example, when you at the beginning of this journey, we try to make ourselves detached, but then it becomes, like a kind of distant feeling, like this. I was trying to ask you. Is it clear?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Nisse.
Thank you.
In that sort of example, yes, I think that, I'm talking more about the feelings of peace and love and happiness and this sort of thing. And there's no doubt that, detachment is always the most misunderstood virtue in the Brahman world, without a doubt. I remember once Baba saying that to be detached, to be truly loving, you have to be detached. To me, detachment is to be so loving, so caring, so close, but uninfluenced. And I think when my intellect retains Baba's truth, we know when my detachment is a false detachment, or a devotional religious style of detachment, or an escapist style of detachment, or a don't care, all these perverted forms of detachment. We have to be knowledgeful enough to know when I'm sort of under the influence, because really when we're detached, I feel that the sign of someone who has a really deep relationship with Baba is that they'll be very detached in an accurate way. They're so lost in Baba. The relationship is so deep, it sort of pulls you beyond influences. And so I think, our own discrimination power has to sort of observe that in this sort of context with detachment. But especially, I think we all know, I don't think the feelings of true joy are deceptive unless it's a temporary joy from a temporary desire. But I think those on the journey know what a true feeling of joy, true feeling of love is. I don't know whether I've really responded appropriately.
It was a very good response. There is one question that came directly, which is important. And that one is saying, what if we didn't have any experience yet? How do we continue with yoga? Any guidance for newcomers with no experience with God yet? Excuse me, I'm coughing a bit, but I hope you got the question. If we haven't had experiences yet, what to do?
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think never ever give up. I honestly believe that the first step to spiritual experience is becoming a point. And I would say in this first step of Brahman life to be self-conscious, our practice is very superficial today. It's more about we sort of believe the idea. But you know, something 80% of the world believes there's something more than a body. But to really do the work of soul consciousness, I think the more I'm detached from my body, it's almost like the law says, the more I enter a world of spiritual experience. And the second thing I think that really opens the door of spiritual experience is, you know, to really allow myself to feel Baba's love. Love is the doorway to feel and experience. And I often think that if you lack experience, sit at Amrit Vela, sit in front of Baba like a little child and give yourself permission to be loved. And if you can't feel it, and many can't, don't panic, but keep experimenting and observe what is blocking. If I'm sitting in front of this perfect love I've always looked for, the lover of the soul, the real relationship I've always searched for, and I can't feel it, what is it in me? And almost always my experience personally, and talking to many, it's this profound sense of unworthiness that I've collected in the second half of the cycle. I'm not worthy to feel loved by God. I'm not worthy. And this lack of this unworthiness doesn't allow us really to experience. And like I said before, I do feel that the culture of the contemporary world of thinking so much, even we Brahmins just overthinking, over-processing, suppresses the nature to taste, feel, and experience. And so somehow to use my thinking in a more economical way. So the more I'm detached from my body, I think less and I experience more. Just like I was saying in the Golden Age, it's almost like we're on that journey of not overthinking about things. I don't know what you all felt when you met Daddy Gulzar. I mean, I just felt, I didn't feel her mind was overactive, and yet she was so aware. So I think you can be absolutely aware of everything going on, but not overthinking about it, overanalyzing. Just be present and aware. And then I think your mind will start to grow experience, spiritual experience.
I'm taking over because Stefania is coughing. Thank you, Charlie.
I hope Stefania's okay.
Yes. Connected to what you said, I said, but still there are questions who are very like fundamental. One interesting one here, how to be a master or mighty authority on the one hand, and be obedient to beliefs, behaviors, and codes of conduct that are often cultural. And the second question, Shiv Baba, the Supreme Soul, has not created the drama, isn't it? So why to consider it always right and good and accepted?
Well, maybe I'll start with the second question first, if I remember that, you know, to say the drama is good or bad is body conscious, in a sense. The drama just is. The drama's perfect. Of course, at this time, the drama, the karmic accounts are coming, but when we label the drama, this was a great scene of drama, this was a terrible scene of drama, but drama is drama. And we should make effort for a good outcome, but what happens ultimately is eternally fixed. And, you know, sometimes I think we have a good relationship with Baba. Baba's so lovable, but what's my relationship with drama? Drama's like a moody person. You never know what mood they're going to be in. And yet we need a loving relationship with drama too. And the first question, if I remember, personally, I feel Srimat, I don't see Srimat as rules and regulations. I've never seen it like that, because who likes rules and regulations? To me, Srimat is a deep code of truth, that if I realize its power and I follow it, frees me from sorrow. It frees me from sorrow. And so I don't see it, because who wants rules and regulations and petty things? I mean, maybe there are a few cultural bits and pieces, but all the fundamental Srimat, you know, I think there's 3 types of Srimat. There's, you know, lifestyle Srimat, which is, you know, wake up in the morning and meditate and remember Baba and listen to the Moli, etc. And when we follow that, we stop further bad karma. There's relationship Srimat, which is children have good wishes for others, children forgive others, children, you know, have mercy, this sort of stuff. And if I really follow that, honestly, I feel it frees me from the give and take of sorrow in human relationships. If I understand this is a deep truth embedded, that if I follow, it frees me. And then there's consciousness Srimat, which is really, as Baba said, you know, forget the body and the relationships of the body and remember me alone. I mean, how much do we really follow? I don't really see all the petty things of, not petty, but not so important things of what I wear and all that sort of stuff. To me, the Srimat is what I've just more been saying, that it frees me. And to me, that's not cultural anything. The real Srimat frees the soul from sorrow. I remember once, and I'll finish in a sec, you know, one brother sat in front of Baba and Baba said, gave him drishti, and then Baba said, you have a question, don't you? I said, yes, Baba. He said, ask it. And he said, like a little child, it was quite sweet, Baba, how can I get my self-respect back? And you know what Baba said? Just follow Srimat. And afterwards we were talking, you know, you can go to the libraries, there's 1 million books with 1,000 pages on how to get your self-respect. And God is, in a way, what he's saying is, if you follow the truth in action, you'll get your self-respect back. And yeah, it was really lovely. I don't know whether I answered the question again.
Thank you, Charlie. I think you, to my understanding, you really hit the seed of where these questions often coming from in us. For me, I also wanted to reframe the question in the sense, because often people ask, like, when do we have to take initiative? When do we have to kind of lead or be creative? I mean, create and do things, like be responsible, for example. And when do we have to step back? Maybe the master-child aspect. But I totally connect with what you say. I mean, if there is a solid, strong self-respect and connection with Baba and deep understanding of Srimat as energy rules, or as wisdom about how energy flows, then that isn't really a question, because the question can be intellectual, but the impulse to do something comes from within, and then you just know it's not a fight in a way. That's what I'm taking from what you are saying. I hope I got you right. There are more questions, Charlie. I hope we can answer. You can answer a few of them more. So we do yoga, fill us with power, but when we come in gatherings of people, it feels difficult to be with them due to different sanskaras. Sometimes we won't obey what we say and we won't agree with them. Feels very hard to be in a gathering with people, the person writes. So I think it's an experience of on the one hand, having powerful experiences of yoga and feeling power inside, and on the other hand, when mingling with people, being confronted with sanskara clashes.
Yeah, I think, I think this is one of the biggest questions for all we BKs. And I remember the first time I went to Madhavan, there was one sister there who said to me, you have to be an introvert yogi and an extrovert yogi. By that, she meant you have to love your own company and in 1 second, enjoy the company with others too. Because most of us have a preference. And I honestly believe that the reason we don't enjoy company much is we see defects. And so when we come into company and we see defects, we feel uncomfortable inside. So we then prefer our own company because my thoughts aren't torturing me as much, so to speak. That's probably too strong a word. Or some people, if they don't have company, they feel insecure. But we have to jump from both sides. And, once I also remember Baba was saying, you people, he's talking about the Brahmin family, said you people sit in yoga, you fill up with power, the bhati finishes, you open your mouth and all the power drains out of your mouth. And I think, it's sometimes like that. We are karma yogis. We have to apply our truth in life. And I think, we've done so much running away and escaping from responsibility in relationships and things because it presses buttons. So our reaction is to run away from things that press our buttons. Actually, they're the very things I should remain around to transform. And I feel the biggest thing in Brahman life is just to become detached and loving in that sense. Be with people and not absorb, observe. It's my weakness, and we hear it 1,000 times. We know it backwards, we teach it, and we just fall into the trap of allowing someone else's behavior to affect me. And I really deeply believe that the whole thing that Baba goes on about so much about good wishes, good wishes, good wishes, giving, being a benefactor, being benevolent. The more I give, the less I take disrespect, take bad behavior, take sorrow, take hurt, all these sorts of things. And I really feel it's almost like a decision. I feel at this time in the cycle, we just have to get over being so disturbed, affected by other people, whether it's their words, their actions, their vibrations, their face. I think we're too vulnerable. We're far too, and I really think that's such an important decision, just to really make the decision. I'm not going to take sorrow from others. Anyway, I'm rambling on a little bit about that.
Thank you very much. Very, very valuable point. Here's a point which also connects to blockages, I would say, in churning. How do you work through old pain issues and attachment to old habits, who in my experience come up during churning and during yoga with Baba? So you want to churn and then pain is coming up and you cannot really churn.
Yeah. You know, I think that sometimes, you know, memories come up for all of us. They just flush into the screen of my mind. And sometimes we try to suppress that memory, forget that memory, or sometimes we let that memory take over and control my feelings. The reality is it's going to happen. And I feel that once again, it's sort of beginning from a position of strength. The whole of this life rests on my relationship with Baba. That's where power comes from. And when I feel secure, when I feel loved, when I feel belonging, you know, I can look at my pain and observe it a bit more and look underneath it. Where's it really coming from? To be honest, sometimes I think we can't fully say what the seed of it is. But if I look deep and I take responsibility, I think Baba gives amazing power to change. But if I'm avoiding it, I have this self-denial about, and so that just keeps coming up, and it comes up, I just try to push it down or rush around in service so that it won't come back again. But I think when I'm in a position of strength with Baba and then I can really look, well, why does this keep coming? What do I need to learn? What effort do I need to make, or focus do I need to really start to dismantle the power of this painful feeling over me? This to me is real spiritual effort. I have the courage to be honest. Yes, it is my pain. Someone else may be an instrument to trigger it, but it's my pain. I've got to look at it and let go and focus on the positive effort. I feel Baba's way is not so much to go into the depth of why the pain and all the reasons, but to identify it is pain, what's the seed, and then put effort in the positive solution with my yoga to really, so it doesn't have so much strength over me.
Thank you, Charlie. I think we have to stop, even though there are 2 or 3 more questions. And we want to have a meditation as well. And it would be lovely if you could share some words.
Sure.
And before that, just the announcement that we have our interactive Churning together in the afternoon again, 5 o'clock. And we love to hear your experiences as well as creating new ones together. Have I forgotten anything, Stefania? That's
No,
it.
I don't think so.
And a big thank you to the translators, Enrica, Gopi, Sulang, Manuel, and also to Ilya and Mark and Ricardo for your amazing support with the technical background. Yes, in UK time it's 4 o'clock, European time it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And once again, all sessions are on YouTube, on our Churning and Writing Retreat YouTube channel. Also Spanish and some German translations. Please have a look and go back to it. Thank you. And we close with a meditation, and we can open our cameras to take and share Drishti. Thank you.
Let me sit quietly. And begin my inner journey to become the eternal point. Just feel yourself stepping back, letting go, withdrawing, to the center of the forehead. I, the micro point, the soul. The more I let go, the more I withdraw to this point, just feel the speed of your mind cooling down. And in this sweet place of deep soul consciousness, let me observe the quality of my thinking. Am I self-absorbed? Lost in my own story, my own world, my problems, my issues? Or am I preparing myself to become fully naked in front of Baba? With a plain intellect, an intellect that does not desire anything, has no agenda, an intellect ready to fully receive from Baba. And like a small child with a pure heart, let me be fully present in front of Baba. Feel Baba's vibrations entering the core of my being. Just feel open. Allow Baba in. And feel how these vibrations begin to heal me. And in this sweet place with Baba, each thought merges into a sweet feeling, a sweet experience. My inner world is filled with divine experiences. Om Shanti.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Stefania. Thank you, everybody. It's been lovely to be with you.
Lots of love to the family there.
Yeah.
Just wait a moment because we have homework for you from Charlie Bai that will be put on the screen now. So please wait a moment and to get your homework.
So thank you so much again, everyone. So I'll take leave.
Thank you. Om
Is
Shanti.
that okay? Thanks,
Yes.
Carol. Thanks, Vanya. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
Thank you.